Welcome back, everybody. We're taking another deep dive, and today it's all about ancient Egyptian cosmology.
Sounds pretty heady.
It is, but fascinating. We're going to try to unpack how the ancient Egyptians viewed the universe, life, and death.
And what are we using to help us understand their viewpoint?
Our guide is going to be excerpts from the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts. And get this.
Yeah.
They saw the world as like a finite space,
Okay.
but inside an infinite ocean. Can you imagine?
Oh, like a tiny island in a vast cosmic sea.
Exactly. It's a really different way of thinking about things.
It really is.
Yeah.
So how did they picture the structure of this world island?
Well, they had these gods, Geb and Nut, representing the earth and the sky.
I think I've heard of them.
And they envisioned them as literally enclosing the world.
Like a dome.
Exactly. With another god, Shu, holding back this infinite ocean they called Nu.
So Shu is like a cosmic dam.
You got it. Can you imagine living with that image every day?
It would definitely give you a different perspective. This constant sense of the universe pressing in.
For sure. And that sense of, well, precariousness also comes through in their understanding of the sun's journey.
I'm listening.
They had this concept of the winding canal, marking the sun's path.
Like its orbit, what we call the ecliptic.
Yes, exactly. But they didn't stop there. To travel this path, they envisioned the sun god Ra riding in two boats.
Two.
One for the day, across the sky, and another for the night.
And the night boat was for.
Passage through the underworld. They called it the duet.
So the sun wasn't just setting each night, it was taking a trip.
More like working a double shift. Rebirth each morning from the sky goddess Nut, and then a nightly voyage through the underworld.
What was the purpose of this nightly journey? Why the underworld?
It wasn't about punishment.
It wasn't.
Not like we typically think of it. For them, it was more a realm of transformation.
Transformation.
Yeah. Every night, Ra would face challenges in the duat and then emerge reborn, ensuring life could continue.
A kind of nightly reset button for the universe.
I like that. And this idea of death and rebirth as this fundamental part of the natural order.
Something to embrace, not fear.
Exactly. It really is at the core of their whole cosmology.
And it connects to the story of Osiris, right? The king of the duat.
You're right. He was believed to be the son of Geb and Nut, those earth and sky gods we talked about.
Okay.
And he embodied this life force that was crucial for the sun's rebirth each night.
Hold on. So Osiris is born from the earth and sky, connected to the sun's rebirth. What does this have to do with the afterlife?
Well, think of Osiris as the ultimate symbol of resurrection. His story is going to be important as we go along here.
I see. Keep going.
The ancient Egyptians believed that it was through Osiris that people, especially kings, could achieve a similar transformation in the afterlife.
Immortality.
Right, like they were mirroring the sun's cycle of death and rebirth.
So the king's journey through the afterlife wasn't just some random adventure.
Not at all. It was carefully modeled after both the sun's journey and the story of Osiris.
Almost like a cosmic reenactment.
Even more. Think about it. We're looking at these pyramid texts.
Right.
These weren't just stories or guides. These were spells and utterances carved right into the pyramids.
How awful stuff.
They were enacting the story to help the king achieve this transformation.
Wow. And each king had their own personalized set of spells, right?
Right, like a custom-made roadmap for navigating the afterlife.
Exactly. And these texts are filled with all sorts of vivid imagery and symbolism. It really gives us a glimpse into how they thought.
Absolutely. And one that I found fascinating is from Eunice, spell 68. It says, provide yourself with the foam that comes from you. 4 times the meal. 1 loaf of sin's bread, 1 jug of beer.
Okay. Foam. What kind of foam are we talking about here?
It's a bit of a mystery. Scholars debate the exact meaning, but it likely had to do with purification rituals.
The ancient Egyptians were pretty obsessed with purity, especially when it came to the afterlife.
Right, so maybe this foam was a way to cleanse the king, removing any impurities from their earthly life.
Kind of like a spiritual detox before they set off on this afterlife journey.
Makes sense.
Then there's another line, also from Eunice, spell 188. O iced snake, the vulture's mouth, that is your attack. Iced snake. The vulture's mouth, the one belonging to the gold of jubilation, apparent in heat and jubilation.
Whoa, that's a mouthful and a little cryptic. What's with this snake?
It's probably a mythical serpent.
Symbolizing
Chaos and danger, maybe the dangers of the duat.
Okay.
But then there's the vulture's mouth, which seems to be a protective force.
So even in the afterlife, it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Not at all. There were all sorts of challenges to face, and these spells were meant to protect the king. Speaking of navigating the afterlife, there's also this mention of ferrymen. I think it was Eunice, spelled 205. O Curdy of Nezat and you ferrymen of the Jakey-8 that Knummam made, get that ferry boat for Eunice.
Ferrymen in the afterlife. Interesting.
Right. They imagine celestial rivers like their Nile on Earth.
The Nile was everything to them. Makes sense they'd carry that over. Exactly. So the ferrymen would guide the deceased across these rivers to the realm of the blessed dead.
So let me get this straight. You're purified, you've got your spells to ward off serpent attacks, and now you're waiting for your celestial Uber.
Exactly. And it was a pretty high-stakes journey. Remember, the king's fate was tied to the fate of all of Egypt.
If he didn't make it, Egypt was in trouble.
It's not explicitly stated that way in the texts,
Okay.
but you can definitely sense that importance, the connection between the king's well-being and the well-being of the kingdom.
Really fascinating stuff. But before we go too much further,
Yeah.
there are two concepts we need to unpack to understand this afterlife journey. The Ka and the Ak.
You're right. We can't get ahead of ourselves. Those are key to this whole belief system.
Exactly. So tell me, what did the ancient Egyptians think the Ka was?
Think of it as your life force, that energy that makes you
Like your battery.
perfect.
Yeah.
Keeps you powered up. Now, the Ak, on the other hand, that's your transformed spirit. Yeah, like an upgrade, allowing you access to the afterlife.
So not just surviving death, it's thriving in the afterlife.
You got it. And it takes both the Ka and Ak working in sync.
Makes you think. Do our own ideas about souls connect to these ancient Egyptian beliefs?
It really does. It's a great question to consider as we continue exploring these texts.
I can't wait to see what other spells and rituals they came up with for this journey to eternal life.
Let's dive in. We were just talking about Ka and Ak, those crucial forces for the afterlife. And it's making me think about how the ancient Egyptians kind of mirrored their earthly world in the afterlife.
How so?
Well, remember how we talked about those celestial rivers?
Right, like the Nile, but in the sky.
Exactly. It's like they took something so central to their lives, the Nile, and projected it onto the afterlife.
You're absolutely right. The Nile wasn't just a river, it was the lifeblood of Egypt. So it's natural their idea of the afterlife would reflect that.
And the pyramid texts are full of these references to waterways, boats, even marshes.
It's almost like they were trying to create a sense of home in this unfamiliar realm, bringing a piece of Egypt with them.
Yeah, but more than just familiarity, right? The Nile also symbolized renewal and rebirth. Those annual floods brought fertile soil, sustaining life.
Exactly. That concept of cyclical renewal, life from death, that's woven into their entire cosmology.
So the rivers in the afterlife weren't just for transportation, they were representing this constant cycle.
Exactly. But like the real Nile, which could be dangerous, their journey through the afterlife wasn't always peaceful either. Remember that snake?
The ace snake? Yeah, I was just thinking about that. What other dangers were there?
Well, in Eunice, spell 199, there's a mention of the hidden one, like these unseen forces trying to block the king's progress.
Sounds ominous.
And there's even a line about those who are upside down.
Upside down? What does that even mean?
It suggests this world where everything is inverted, the normal rules don't apply.
Like a dark mirror image of their world. Spooky.
Yeah. The Duat was a place of both transformation and danger. It wasn't enough to just get there. They had to navigate these dangers to reach their final goal, eternal life with the gods.
And again, we have to remember the king's journey wasn't just about him. It was about all of Egypt.
Huge pressure to succeed.
Absolutely.
Right.
They believed maintaining this cosmic order, Ma'at, was key to everyone's well-being, even the dead.
Makes sense.
So the king, even in death, was vital in keeping this balance.
This connection between the king and Egypt, even in the afterlife, that's really fascinating.
It really is, and it gets us back to the idea of kingship in the afterlife. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth a deeper look.
Okay, let's do it. What did they believe was the role of the king?
Well, based on the pyramid texts, it seems they saw him as more than just a ruler. He was a link between the gods and the people.
A divine intermediary.
Exactly. His authority was tied to the divine. And this becomes even more prominent in the afterlife.
You keep mentioning that the deceased king is often referred to as Osiris.
Yeah. It's like he takes on the identity of the god of the afterlife, inheriting all of his powers and responsibilities.
So the king never really dies. He just transitions to a different role.
Exactly. One that guarantees that cosmic order continues.
Makes you wonder if that belief shaped their whole view of death.
I think it did. It's this idea of continuity. Even if the king dies, His role in the afterlife ensures everything keeps going.
It's like the afterlife was a parallel world with its own challenges, but mirroring their life on Earth. And it all comes back to the king's journey.
Right. They believed that everyone could achieve some kind of immortality, but the king's journey was the most important because it was tied to the fate of everyone else.
I see. Like different levels of achievement in the afterlife.
Yeah, almost like their version of heaven, but it depends on your efforts and knowledge. And the pyramid texts were like a guide to getting to the highest level.
Like a cheat sheet to the afterlife.
Exactly. They had the knowledge needed to overcome challenges.
But it wasn't just about memorizing the spells, right? They had to really understand the bigger picture.
Absolutely. It was about grasping the principles of Marat, that cosmic order we talked about.
They wanted to become part of that harmony.
To thrive, not just survive. And before we move on, there's another important concept we should touch on. Transformation.
Sounds intriguing.
There's this line in Eunice, spell 169. Eunice is Osiris in a dust devil. What do you make of that?
A dust devil? What's that all about?
It's probably not literal. It's a metaphor for the power of the afterlife to change you.
Like the dust devil, this whirlwind is sweeping up the king and transforming him.
Exactly. It's not just about reaching the destination, but how the journey changes you.
Shedding your mortal limits, embracing this new eternal identity.
A spiritual makeover. But what did they believe the transformed Ankh actually looked like?
Well, the texts don't give us a clear picture, but there are clues.
Like what?
In Eunice, spell 156, the king is described as having grown wings as a falcon, feathered as a hawk.
So like a majestic bird soaring through the heavens.
Powerful imagery.
Oh.
But then there's Eunice, spell 222, where he's described as Sobek, green of plumage, with alert face and raised fore.
Wait, Sobek, the crocodile god.
That's the thing with ancient Egyptian symbolism. They blended imagery, creating these composite beings.
So the Ankh could be both bird and reptile. A flying croc with a hawk head.
Maybe. It's this mix of human and animal, earthly and divine, that makes their cosmology so fascinating.
It's like, even in death, they weren't trying to leave behind their earthly existence entirely, but transcend it.
You got it. And it's that connection, that sense of continuity that makes studying their cosmology so intriguing. Makes us rethink our own ideas about life and death and the universe.
Right. Makes you wonder what it would mean if the Egyptians were right. But I think that's a conversation for another time. We have a lot more pyramid texts to explore.
Absolutely. There's so much more to uncover. And as we go deeper, we'll see even more of these fascinating spells, rituals, and ideas that made up their world.
Let's keep going. You know, one thing that keeps coming up for me as we go through these pyramid texts is how, like, fluid the Egyptian gods were.
Fluid? What do you mean?
They weren't just stuck in one role, you know?
Ah, you're right. They were complex, multifaceted.
Yeah. And they could even change over time.
That's a great point. It's different from other ancient pantheons, like the Greeks.
Right.
Their gods were more, like, specialized. But the Egyptians, take Osiris.
Yeah, he's a good example.
We talked about him as god of the afterlife.
Right.
But he was also associated with agriculture, fertility, even kingship.
He was a busy god.
Like a divine CEO managing all these different departments.
That's a great way to put it. And while the pyramid texts don't lay it all out,
True.
they give us hints about how the Egyptians saw these different sides of their gods.
I'm thinking about that passage in Teddy's texts, spell 199.
What about it?
Where Isis and Nephthys are pleading with Osiris.
Yeah.
They weren't just mourning him, they were invoking his power to protect the king.
So it wasn't just worshiping one static version of the god. It was about tapping into the aspect they needed at that moment.
Precisely. And that really highlights the practicality of their beliefs.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about faith, it was about actively working with the divine.
To get stuff done.
Exactly. And it makes me think about another thing we keep seeing, duality.
Oh, yeah. We talked about the sun's two journeys.
Right.
And the Ka and Ankh being two parts of the soul. Is this like a big thing in their worldview?
Huge. Duality is everywhere. Gabe and Nut, earth and sky enclosing the world, Horus and Seth, order and chaos in their eternal struggle, even life and death.
Two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. But it wasn't about one force being good, the other bad.
More about understanding how they worked together, creating balance.
Exactly. Maintaining that balance, Mott, was crucial.
So Mott is like their ultimate cosmic order, where everything has its place.
Yes. And it wasn't just about the universe as a whole.
It wasn't.
They believed each person had a part to play in maintaining Mott. living a good life, upholding justice, honoring the gods that all contributed.
It's bigger than just personal salvation, though.
It's about seeing yourself as part of this interconnected web. Your actions matter. They have an effect on everything.
Wow, that's deep.
Right. It gives more meaning to their beliefs about the afterlife, too.
How so?
It wasn't just about escaping to some paradise. It was about continuing to be a force for good, upholding Mott even after death.
That adds a whole other level to it. It's not just this life that matters, but the impact you have on the balance, even afterward.
Exactly. And it really shows how seriously they took their beliefs. It wasn't just a set of rules, it was a way of living.
And yet, for all the challenges and complexity, there's this sense of optimism, right?
Absolutely. They didn't see death as the end. It was a transformation, a chance to keep going, to reach something even greater.
All those descriptions of feasts, abundance, joyful reunions.
Right. It was a place of hope, not fear.
It really makes you question how we see death today.
It does. The ancient Egyptians embraced it as part of the cycle. Maybe we can learn something from that.
Maybe we can approach the unknown with more curiosity, less fear.
It's worth considering. They clearly didn't let their focus on the afterlife stop them from living fully in this life.
It's about finding that balance, I guess, between accepting death and appreciating life.
I think that's a great takeaway from our deep dive.
It really is. And it's been incredible to explore these ideas with you. It's given me a new appreciation for how the ancient Egyptians saw the world.
Me too. They left behind such a rich tapestry of beliefs, and it still resonates today.
Their